President Trump continues to issue a series of controversial pardons and commutations. The list includes a former New York congressman who pleaded guilty to felony tax evasion, a former Connecticut governor found guilty of obstructing justice, a rapper known as NBA Youngboy who pleaded guilty to possessing weapons as a felon, and more. On the list of pardons were the men convicted in a scheme to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, but Trump says he's looking into their case.
I'm going to look at it. I will take a look at it. It's been brought to my attention. I did watch the trial. It looked to me like somewhat of a railroad job. I'll be honest with you. It looked to me like some people said some stupid things. You know, they were drinking, and I think they said stupid things. But I'll take a look at that. And a lot of people are asking me that question from both sides, actually. A lot of people think they got railroaded. A lot of people think they got railroaded.
Remember that situation. Those men were convicted for potentially plans to kidnap a sitting governor. President Trump has also commuted the sentences of former Chicago gang leader Larry Hoover. Hoover, once called one of the most notorious criminals in Illinois history, has been serving multiple life sentences since the 1970s after he was convicted for ordering the killing of a 19-year-old drug dealer. Hoover has previously renounced his criminal past and has made requests to shorten his sentence, including under the First Step Act, a criminal justice reform bill passed during Trump's first term. Trump commuted the sentences after a campaign by hip-hop artist Ye, formerly Kanye West, who's lobbied Trump in the Oval Office to consider releasing Hoover. The move is not expected to set Hoover free, though, as he has over 100 years left to serve on state murder charges in Illinois that presidential clemency doesn't erase. Joining us now, NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley. Ryan, those pardons seem to be a hodgepodge of people, but what's the common thread that you found on the list?
I think, getting access to Donald Trump is the key point here, and being able to make a case that they were, you were either a victim of government overreach. Obviously, Donald Trump, who faced those two cases from Jack Smith, as well as that's, separate cases from state authorities, I think has a lot of sympathy for individuals who allege that they are targeted. You saw that with the reality television show Couple, for example, who could, make the case that they, or did make the case that they were being targeted for politics, even though that case, I should point out, started during Donald Trump's first term in office. That's when that original indictment came down. It was a long-standing investigation. And so, I think that that's sort of the secret sauce for getting some sympathy from Donald Trump, is saying that, you're targeted for your political reasons or just having that sort of inside connection. And, if you look back to who his pardon czar is now, that was, an individual, Alice Johnson, who got to his attention in the first term because of Kim Kardashian, right, who got that case in front of him after she saw a video about that case. So I think that access is a really key component here, and I think that there's a lot of lawyers who are basically trying to figure out how they can make their way to the White House and make their case.
Yeah, access is key. Loyalty is key. You look at the case, for example, of the Chrisleys. Their daughter is a Trump supporter. And Trump's pardon attorney yesterday pretty much said the quiet part out loud. He wrote on social media, quote, "No MAGA left behind." So what do you think this suggests about how the White House is actually choosing people to pardon and who it might mean could come next?
Yeah, Ed Martin actually posted that about that case involving a sheriff who was the supporter of Donald Trump. And the allegations there and the conviction there was for this notion that he was basically taking bribes and handing out these badges and making people auxiliary police officers even when they didn't live in the county. And that would allow them to bring guns around the country, right? And it would also allow people who were convicted felons to have weapons. And so he was basically taking cash in exchange for this benefit, was what the jury found him guilty of there. But because he was able to make that case that this was, that this was because of his politics, he was someone who did regular interviews with Breitbart. Obviously the administration seemed sympathetic to that, and the now pardoned attorney at the Justice Department, Ed Martin, was able to get that. That was the first case that he sort of handled. He's also going to be reviewing, of course, he said, and met with a lawyer who was making the case for all of the individuals who were not pardoned in connection with the January 6th attack. Most people were pardoned, but there was that narrow category of individuals from those far-right groups, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, who are not, and they want their pardons now. They were only granted clemency, meaning that they were all freed, but their convictions still stand. So they're now working to get those tossed out as well. And Ed Martin actually met with one of the lawyers who was representing them just last week and accepted those applications, and those are working their way through the system. So I think that access point, this is not the normal system that we're going through the Justice Department, where there's often a lengthy process, often a really thorough review. And, critics would say it would take too long to get through that process previously in different administrations.
Yeah, and you and I were talking when Ed Martin was pulled from contention to be the U.S. attorney in D.C. We now see that this new role that he's found himself in still allows him a lot of leverage and power. The other piece of this, too, when we're talking about what could come next, is you look at Trump leaving the door open to consider pardons for the men who were convicted of allegedly trying to kidnap the governor of Michigan. I mean, this was at the height of concerns of political violence that very much still permeate the political realm. What would it say if this pardon were to come down? And what are the considerations here?
Yeah, there are really big, there's huge allegations in that case. Obviously, there's also some controversy in that case involving, members of the FBI. BuzzFeed News had done some reporting contemporaneously about what was going on with that case. So there's been a lot of criticism, especially on the right, especially from the same critics of the January 6th prosecutions about that case in particular. Of course, people who are just broadly critical of the FBI, Ali.
Yeah, a lot for us to continue watching here, but the pardon train is certainly rolling and has been this week.